Hey everybody. Hey everybody, I am Jake of the Tattoo Improvement Network and welcome to another episode of Fireside Technique. In this episode, I am not the one doing the technique. Is that what I said last time we did this? Yeah. I'm not the one techniquing today. We had Christina Havens in town, the very talented portrait artist, figure artist, and we sat down for episode 117 of the Fireside Tattoo podcast, and we talked about painting from life and some of the unique challenges, and she and I actually set up a model and painted together, not on the episode, but before the episode. And so this episode of Fireside Technique is actually Christina critiquing my painting from that day. We worked from life in, I think, 3 20-minute sessions, so we didn't have a lot of time, and I struggle a lot to, sometimes I struggle to get my block in really deliberate, really quickly. Other times I get it in there really quickly and then I make mud for a while. So I'm still working to paint from life. It's something I work on a lot and it's something that I still struggle with, and Christina's really accomplished in it. So she makes a few marks through this painting that really make a huge difference, but more than the work that she does on this painting, I just ask that you listen to some of the points that she stresses, because this is kind of a short episode and she knew it was. She didn't overwork the painting, didn't work it too much, but she did make a lot of really great points. Also, if you haven't watched episode 117, make sure to go check that out after you finish watching this video, because she really goes a lot more in depth and we talk a lot more about the challenges of painting from life, a lot about all the information in shadows and what to do with all that information and how to process it, and tricks for not over painting or over rendering and things like that. So check this out. I hope you like it. Once you're finished, be sure to go to tattooimprovement.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll get all kinds of great stuff like emails. Have a good one. Thanks.
So I'm super excited to try out all your cool rosemary brushes.
Yeah, me too. I still haven't tried all of them. Yeah. I like that one a lot.
This one, yeah,
but I didn't clean it out yesterday. Evergreen.
Oh.
I mean, I did clean it, but I haven't washed it.
It is nice and soft. It's a cool. Yeah.
I like that.
Love me some rosemary brushes. Okay, so we were working from your wife yesterday,
right?
And she's much prettier than this.
She is.
Like, yeah.
I felt like she was scowling at me that way, though.
Well, why? Yeah.
Why wouldn't she?
That was just too easy. I'm not even going to go there. Okay, Jay. So I don't have a reference photo in front of me right now, but just based on what I was observing yesterday and just going in here saying, okay, what can we do to make this painting better? Right. And every once in a while I have a student who's so wrapped up in getting a painting to match a photograph that I say, it's time to put the photograph down. Yeah. What's going to make your painting better?
Right.
So if I was coming up to this painting a little bit earlier in the day or a little bit earlier in our process, I would probably talk to you a little bit about composition, because she's, if we look at the negative space here and here and here, it's it's a little bit too even. I'd like to see her moved up a little bit, maybe up, left, up and over to the left.
Do you think anything about scale, like the size of the figure, the size of the shape, as opposed to the size of the canvas? Do you have a rule that you follow, or is it?
I sometimes I'll use my hand just to make sure. If we start to get bigger than a hand, sometimes the face can get a little cartoonish. Okay. That's just my personal opinion.
On a board this size, or in general?
You know what? Just in general, I usually don't do my faces much bigger than palm size. And sometimes that just means from chin to eyebrows. That doesn't mean
the whole
from chin
head
all the way to the hairline. So I like the size. I just wonder if it had been moved just a little bit up that way, would it give us a little bit more room for her ear even?
Okay.
So that's another thing that's happening right here. I feel composition-wise that you're trying to get her ear in the space that you allotted for it versus where it would really be on her head. Okay. So that's one thing that I want to kind of play with really quick. And you got your easel, your palette here still from yesterday. You were using your transparent red oxide, French ultramarine, and white predominantly, correct?
And then a little bit of at the very end, I bought some King's Blue in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to do first is just kind of hide that ear, because it's really not doing anything for our composition, and I don't feel it's in the right place. So I'm just going to take that out of the out of the problem for now. Okay. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to kind of liven up the shadow over here, just bring a little bit more of this transparent red oxide into it. And I think it was there at some point yesterday, but right at the end you just kind of were like, oh, I'm not happy with this, and you started wiping things away. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to fix it if you take it away?
Well, I felt like it was getting a little bit dark and opaque for me, and I liked the kind of transparency in the shadow. And so sometimes, especially with Alla Prima, some of my favorite paintings, or when people I think are really successful, they leave the shadows almost the background.
Yes.
Like they don't even paint them in.
Yes.
And at the end, I tried to make that happen, and it didn't.
Well, it does a couple things. Visually from far away, you're still very effective, but then when you get up close, there's this wonderful variety of things happening on the surface. So if we have the same application of paint from highlight to shadow, it can be kind of dull.
Right.
So when I come up and I'm like, oh wow, that's like raw canvas, or man, he didn't even put any paint on there and it still reads from far away. That's one of those little magic things that I think we really started to focus on when we were talking to Jeff about transparent versus opaque. And if you can leave some of those things happening on your surface, you can have a much more interesting surface.
Yeah.
So even this, just like doing that right now, Jake, this was the place yesterday where you had more resolution happening. The ear was, because it wasn't really nailed in. This is where it's the great C.W. Monday quote where like the power of the suggestive is greater than the statement of reality. So unless you get that statement of reality, like you nail it, just suggest. Now that's not a scapegoat. You can't use that for everything because you can't just have blurs everywhere and say, "Oh, I'm just suggesting stuff." Right. But in moderation, you can.
I like that term.
Yeah, in moderation. Yeah, C.W. Monday's got some very, very painterly language in his pieces, and he just kind of suggests things sometimes, and it's like, wow, that's beautiful. Just 3 strokes, and we've got a tree or a boat or something. I'm just kind of warming.
You're warming up all the shadows right now, basically, right?
Well, transparent red oxide is a fantastic color to do that. Just get some life back into it. I think what happened in a few of your shadows is a touch too much white came into that, and you can get some really nice range just from your transparent red oxide with your French ultramarine and a touch of white. You get a beautiful range of values and colors, but you got to toe the line between getting, you got to be careful not to get it chalky.
Right. And if we're talking about shadows being transparent and lights being opaque, you made the point to me in one of the classes whenever I started blocking my shadows, and you're like, "Are you using white in that shadow because it's opaque, right? And aren't you going for transparent, translucent shadows? So how are you going to pull that off?" And that's it was a good point, and it's something that you don't, if you're not aware of it, it's something that you'll do just because you think like, oh, that shadow's too dark, I need to lighten it up.
Right.
But it's often you never really want to lighten it with white. You want to lighten it with either thinning it or some other way, huh?
So if you've got a limited palette here and you have to lighten the shadow, you've seen almost like what you've got going on here on some of those like gray palette pads where you have, like they show you, oh, we've got a string of greens, and oh, we have a pretty string of blues, and we have a pretty string of oranges and whatever else. So you're going to find the value here that will lighten up your shadow. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to white.
Right.
If you don't have the full like 927 colors that are out there, you can't go and pick, okay, this is the one I need here. You've got to mix it and make it happen. So, okay guys, I only have 2 brushes in my hand so far. So if I've got to lighten a shadow, I'm going to kind of go over here and mix just a hint of what you've already got going here into my shadow color, and then maybe I can come over here and find a jawline, go a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to move right next to that. Maybe find that again, just to find that little bit of light there. And I'm not sure if the camera's picking up even that subtlety that's there, but so one thing I want to do before we get into the face, and just for a second or two, is just find, you've got this really beautiful blue on your palette. You've got the French ultramarine, and you've got your King's blue. And I just want to use a little bit of pure blue somewhere to just show me how bright our colors can be. So just kind of randomly, I'm just going to bring a little bit of this over here. Just to see if we can, take out some of that dull brown, whatever caca you made over here. We want happy little blues coming after.
And so that instantly creates some nice separation and gives and it cools things down so much that it gives us a wide we have you just instantly introduced a much cooler tone, and then also more color intensity, more opacity. So you made a lot of contrast just with a couple of quick marks there.
Yeah. So in general, I want this to be our focus.
Right.
So that dark mass over there was like, it just kind of kept sucking me in. I'm like, okay, we've got to do something over there to battle that. And I know that there's hair there, and we can still bring that in. I don't want her to feel like she's bald or she's got like her hair behind her ear.
Right.
We can still play with that. So this is often what I do with my students, where I'm like, okay, I know there's things I have to work on here, but when I'm coming up to, kind of fresh to a painting, I kind of like to circle in and like zone in on the area that we're going towards.
Right. And if something is catching your attention and pulling you another way, you need to recognize that quickly and get rid of it. Yeah.
So, like this line right here, look at the amount of contrast that we have between this dark brown and this light on her neck. What that's doing is pulling this forward, and if I compare that in space to where the nose should be, it's too much of a competition.
Yeah.
So I want to have a dark back there, but I don't want to have it so bold that it's pulling my attention. So I want to kind of just tone this down.
Right.
Maybe go
and that comes to and that, a lot of times that's just decision making, because you may find that was the darkest. Sometimes that is the sharpest and darkest area, but if it's not supporting the star of your composition, then leave it out.
Then you've got to figure it out.
Right.
So some of the other things we can do is, see, this is a little bit more of the brown in it, a little bit from what was happening yesterday and a little bit from what I grabbed here. So because the color intensity is not as strong, it's also pushing back. One other thing we can do, if we think of all the variety of shapes, values, edges, colors, we can go in here and we can just soften this edge even a little bit. More like just implying the neck there, so that maybe we can bring this out a little sharper, we can bring the nose out a little sharper, and that will also tell us that's further back, that's closer to us.
Right.
So, landscapers do that for an infinite space. Sometimes we're just doing it from, the 6 inches from the nose to the back of the jawline.
Right. Edges being a really important thing that are easy to overlook. And so the idea being that the closer something is to you, the harder the edge, and then the further in the distance it goes, it gets softer. And then you have lost edges that you use. Like now, the back side of her head is a completely lost edge.
Oh, yes, up here.
Or I was thinking like
all
this is lost. So and using those things effectively are really key. I remember Carrie Dunn saying he likes to come back at the end of his paintings and find his 3 to 5 sharpest edges and identify them at the very end. And I've started doing that with tattoos, and it makes a huge difference if you think about edges at the very end. Obviously all the way through, but at the very end,
just
going back
check.
and refining. Yeah.
So we've got a little bit of cool working in here. We've played with a little bit of edge here. We've lost a little bit of shadow. I want to come in and just find. I remember there's like this kind of highlight right up here in her hair. And that's kind of giving me the idea of where my light source is going to come from.
Right.
So if I play with that up here and then I'm just following this down my face, it'll help me solve these problems.
Right.
Again, I don't have a reference photo in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of saying, well, what can I take from this painting, tweak it, make it a little bit better. So now I'm going to kind of go down this line here. We had the privilege of having Tom Nash critique a painting of mine when we were in a studio. We didn't tape it. We didn't know it was going to be that great.
It was really good. I wish we had.
But one of the most simple things that he showed me, and I use all the time now, is, if you think of a simple cylinder like this, and we've got light source, and then it's turning into shadow over here. It's the same thing on a face.
Right.
And whether I add a nose to that, or an eyebrow, or a chin, or whatever, it's still going to be this in general from light to dark. So if my light source is on the side, I'm going to have these like columns of where the light and shadow are moving across the face. It's simplified, but it's pretty true to form. And there's going to be varieties in between, like, again, reflective light. We've got shoulders, so it's going to have reflective light up there. But so by putting this highlight here, what I'm going to do is just kind of follow that down your face and just see if I can find a few highlights almost in that same column.
Right. Keeping in mind that it's just a general. It's either a sphere, a cylinder, or a cube. It's or some combination of those things, and you want to.
Yes. I want to find that.
Right.
I want to find that plane that's catching the light from this source. So I'm going to come up here and make that. And I'm not even really going to redraw your nose or anything. I'm just going to see if we can create a little bit more form by pushing our highlights. And in some cases, who are you? Oh, Jake.
Yes.
Jake, right? Okay.
Right.
Sometimes, Jake, your form is there and your paint is there. It's just there's not enough of it.
Right.
So it's not letting me see it. So I'm just going to pull that nose out a little bit. Maybe go down here. This space too also just got a little muddled. So maybe going back to a little bit more pure transparent red oxide and white right through here. Catching a little bit on the lip. Maybe just the top of it. So it's kind of going right down that line.
And you're obviously really overshooting it right now just to just to get
just giving me that
right
kind of
just
basic,
to make it very obvious to you where that light's going to be, and you can always back off and soften those edges and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm just going to bring in a little bit more now and maybe just warm that up a little bit on the other side. So a lot of this is, again, drawing wise, really pretty strong.
It's just trying to keep in mind that there are basic shapes that you're trying to keep up with, making sure that your light source is deliberate and identified. Everyone
Right. So as I walk up to him, like, oh, she had a highlight, and we actually did that. We put the light up higher on the stage so that we can get more of this overhead cast shadow.
Right.
So a couple of little things I want to just touch base with on features. So let's work from the eyes down. I think in this case, your white of the eye is not matching the value of the skin tones around it. Are you familiar with Daniel Sprick?
Oh,
S-P-R-I-C-K?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he's incredible.
Oh, God. I saw his work in person in Colorado a couple of years ago, and I bought the catalog. And
I've looked at that catalog at your studio before. Yeah,
yes.
Awesome.
And if you just look, like if you go through that book and you just say, I just want to see how he handles eyes, or I just want to see how he handles nose, or I just want to see how he handles lips, you just solve so many problems just by looking at how he does it.
Yeah.
So with eyes, from what I found with Daniel Sprick, is that the value of the white of the eye is very close to the value of the skin tone next to it. It also matches it in temperature. So I am just going to take this down a notch and just tuck that in there.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to double check the value of the white of the eye, look at the skin tone closest to it. Okay. So that was really jumping out. Over here, you did it much more effectively.
Right.
Okay. Right. So I'm just toning that down a little bit. I do think that the actual eyeball is a little, like her iris and pupil a little too big, so we're gonna just scale it down just a tiny bit. Yeah. Okay, even that just changed it. And the other thing right now too is I didn't make it a really harsh line because it's in the shadow. We're gonna lose a little bit of information in there, and time to add another brush just because they're all
right. Yeah, and that comes back to a lot of times people think they're called the whites of the eyes, and you instantly want them to be white. You want a strong highlight in the eye, but often most of the time that there's no real light in the eye. They're tucked in.
Yes, and they've got these sheets over them, and they're orbs. So it's like you're only going to have one spot that's actually catching the highest highlight. So just by toning that down a little bit and softening that, puts it in the shadow. I'd like to find a little bit more information on this one instead. So maybe coming over here and finding just a little. Maybe a little more paint. Just a hint of a lid over here. Yeah. Maybe catching that.
And it doesn't take much. It's literally a lot of times just touching the canvas.
And you saw that way. I just went in and I added it on there instead of drawing it on there.
Right.
So that's like figuring out what brush. Does it come to a nice point? Some of the rosemaries have a beautiful variety of ones that can actually soften edges. This is a long flat. The Series 279, and then this is a ultimate long flat, and that one just comes to more of a point, more of an edge there. So you're just going to find the brushes that do that for you. Right. So there's more we can do in the eyes, but let's keep this kind of brief, and we're going to get maybe you find like one highlight on that one if you wanted to, just to have that little dot there. It's a nice change too in size. So we have all these tiles kind of forming the face, and then we have this little moment there.
Right.
Okay, so nose, I think that you're really strong in the nose, except that we need a little bit more shadow on this side here. Again, if we think of that paper towel when we're dropping down the shadow here, a little bit more shadow on this column. So just pushing that nostril on the right side of her nose into the dark. Right. I think you're pretty good down through here. There might be a tiny bit of reflective light that you could find
on the underneath
here that could just give you a little bit more form. She's got a very rounded nose there, and if you find a little bit of that, we have to go back and forth a touch, find.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference, and it's often pretty. The underside of the nose a lot of times is in shadow, and then it's easy to let it fall into the upper lip, and little things like that make a.
And bring it back out.
Yeah.
And she does have, that distinctive line there, but because, we want to be nice to our wife. We're going to lose that. Yeah. I just call her our wife, like we have some kind of like Utah, I don't know, we're...
Hey, I'm open to suggestions.
Okay, so we're just going to gloss over that remark. I know I brought it up. Okay, so here what's happening is that we've got this very, very high contrast and very, very sharp line on the part of the mouth that's away from us. So we want to shift that. Right. We're going to soften this a little bit. Okay, I'm even going to lose a little bit more information through here.
Yeah.
Oh, just softening it. Look at that.
Yeah, that makes a
that
huge
makes
difference.
a difference. And maybe we can lighten it up just a little bit.
Yeah, to me, looking now that a lot of the shadows have been kind of lightened up and warmed up, that shadow of the upper lip is reading too dark
Way
and
too
too
dark.
cool to
Yes.
me.
So just warming that up a little bit more.
Yeah.
And again, you can see I'm going up and down with this. I'm not like
Mhm.
drawing in a lip.
Yeah.
I'm filling in shape here.
Right.
So just changing that direction a little bit. And again, I can't stress enough, it's like, okay, this is fixing a painting. This is not looking at a photograph, looking at a
Right.
reference and saying, we've got to make this just like her.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's drawing from a bank of knowledge
Sure.
that's from life.
Yes.
Which is what you wouldn't be able to do that otherwise.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to say, okay, well, I know that this, would happen here. And I was lucky I was in the same situation you were yesterday, so I
Right.
know what we were looking at.
Right.
And maybe just finding a little bit more of that hair. And I also just like the element of line coming in, and getting something else happening through
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So even if we step back from this right now,
It's changed.
it's changed
Changed
quite
a
a bit. Your main drawing points were not changed. Background was changed. Cleaning up your shadows and just finding a little bit of variety happening in here. We've pushed our value range too. We've got our highest highlight. We've got some darkest darks, which wasn't quite there when we first sat down.
Right.
And that's another good thing that you can kind of give yourself that range and say, this is where I have to work and am I getting there?
Yeah, yeah. And finding a handful of edges help, like the highlight, that edge of the top of the hair even did a lot for it. Cooling off the background, pushed the face forward.
Yes.
Yeah, the only thing that's still just standing out to me is that shadow, the shadow under the nose being kind of dark and.
It's a little dark
Yeah.
under there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and it's a little bit, you've got already some opaque in there. So you're not going to get to this point where you have this complete transparency,
Right.
which is fine. It doesn't always have to be 100% transparent, 100% opaque. There can be some in between. And it might just be working a little bit of your transparent red oxide into what
Back
you've got
into
there.
it, right. Right, just warming it up a little bit.
Warming up. Warming up a little bit more.
Yeah. Jeff Hine made a good point that you think of, lights being opaque and shadows being transparent, but really if it was a scale of 1 to 100 or 1 to 10, it would get increasingly opaque or
Right.
transparent each.
Right.
So at a 50% gray, or let's say 50% between light and shadow might be 50% opaque. And
Right.
so, and he made a good point that you do that by using opaque or transparent
Right.
pigments,
Right,
and not
right.
just by trying to thin out opaque pigments.
Exactly. So that's one thing about knowing what those paints are. So again, when I was playing with these new paints yesterday, I had no idea how opaque or transparent they were or what their intensity was. So I just had to kind of make it work on the fly, which was fine.
Yeah.
But the thing is with paintings versus photographs, the things that we can achieve, the variety that we can achieve on a painting surface is so much more than anybody's going to achieve with the photograph. The photograph is just going to be what a glossy paper or whatever paper they choose, it's going to be consistent on that whole thing. We've got the opportunity here to have thick chunks of paint, thin washes of paint, little tiles. Yeah, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the big, if we step back and we just did, and that was pretty short. I mean, that was maybe a 20-minute drawing or something like that. The biggest changes that you made were to everything served to reinforce, to drive your eye towards the star of the composition,
Yeah.
which for her, which is the eyes, mouth, nose, that area. So cooling down the background, pushed it forward. Hitting some highlights, sharpening a few edges.
Losing that really dark edge.
Losing
that's
that dark
the net.
edge at the bottom because
Yeah.
that was competing with that. This was drawing attention away from this, and we talk a lot about competing shapes on the show, and it's just a process. But you're
Absolutely.
always thinking like,
Yeah.
does this mark do anything to strengthen this?
Right.
And if it doesn't, then you just don't do it.
Don't do it. And I can see what you're saying now that I'm back away. We've almost got the same thing happening right here. This is a little too close to that.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
you can find.
But, yeah.
I gotta let you do some work on your own.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I hope that helps everybody. That helps me for sure. So and it's always important, I think, to get away from your own paintings for a while and then come back and look at them, and then to have other people chip in. I remember Carrie saying that the idea in their school is that they want the student that started on Monday to be
Yeah.
helping the student that starts on Friday.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be, find someone else in your tattoo shop. I don't care if it's your apprentice. Find someone in your tattoo shop that has another opinion and try to be honest with each other. I think that, that's huge. Makes everyone better. Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.